Okay, welcome back. Back to back. We are back to back. Back to back. Maybe I should go back to my high school reunion. Make everyone go to security clearance. Okay, so back to back. Maybe I should go back to my high school. Maybe my high school. I can't remember. I think it's like a Drake line or something like that. Should go back. Maybe my high school reunion will be worth an appearance. Make everyone go through security clearance. Okay, welcome back. As you can see, we're in a very good mood today. So I figured we might as well do these back to back. Press record. Awesome. I think this one's really cool because it's a good sort of continuation from what we talked about, and I know we talked about a lot of stuff in the previous breakdown, but I think this one really gives you some hands-on practical examples. So let's jump straight into it, have a look, and then we'll break it down. I don't know about you, but I have a love-hate relationship with Bluetooth. I am not the biggest fan. As much as I enjoy this and how flexible it is without the cable and everything, it's just never been my friend. It's just never been a friend of mine. There's always something with it. It doesn't want to connect, and it wants to connect, and then you press record and everything's working, and then you're about ready to, and then now it just doesn't want to connect. Apparently I can connect to Tommy's TV, but I can't connect to my AirPods. Oh, we've gotten something. Now we're asking to connect again. Are you 100% sure that you're connected now? There we go. Okay, cool. Yeah, considering it's something that's been around for a while now, and that's it, like in its X amount of generations, it's still very finicky, especially in the car. When you get like new phones, that's when it's really like super irritating and just nothing wants to work. Yeah, especially with like the Apple Watch as well. Doesn't want to connect with Apple Watch, like the Bluetooth, just to play like some music or something like that. Okay. Last breakdown we were talking about, one of the things we talked about was creating these sort of tension and call responses that we talked about a few times. Okay, so we're going to look at one of the key points where we are creating this sort of really big build up and tension, and then we're going to look at one of the last things we talked about in the previous breakdown was this sort of switching over to different genre, switching over to different style of music, and when you want to do that. So we've spent a few minutes now, a portion of the mix on a particular style, and we've gone through some stages and we've gone through some peaks and troughs, okay? And now I am going to switch to a different blend, different style of music. Now, one of the ways that we can approach this when we are switching over, okay, we can look at doing it from a perspective of creating a dramatic build-up, right? So we can do it more intentionally, like we are here, and go with that classic sort of progressive house, big build-up, right? That's been overabused and overused and oversaturated and everything in between. And we're gonna take that, flip it around a little bit, add our own unique flavor to it. And then instead of doing something that people are expecting, we go completely left field, right? So that's just one example, right? So you can take something that's been, a staple in dance music, and you can use it, right? And you can create something that people are sort of familiar with, right? Add your own spice to it, and then surprise them, okay? First and foremost, whenever I can, I really enjoy doing something else in the background, okay? So we have something like this where I basically just put my finger on it, right? And we're just, subtly, creating that tension underneath, okay? Some of these effects, they require a little bit of time to build up, right? They're a little bit more subtle in nature, and they require just a little more time, over 4 or 8 bars, to really start ramping up. They start duplicating, start repeating themselves, okay? And create that energy underneath. And usually when something like that, I try to bring in and sort out the next track with one hand at least, or bring up the next cue point. And in this situation, I wasn't really able to do that. So we've had to let go, and then we let the song breathe a little bit without anything, and that's okay. Usually I would try to go even more ballistic, and keep on adding effects. But in this situation, we weren't really able to do that because I have to have the next song to bring in, right? We're not continuing with this song. We're having the next song that we want to switch into. What effects you use here, like, I'm very up to you. I've we've talked about this before. Don't get into, what effects use here, what effects use here. It's complete nonsense, right? Every song's different, every mix is different, every situation is different. Always look at, the only thing I would suggest is always look at adding a couple things in. Don't look at just adding one thing in. Try and always couple that with something else to create something different, and just see how you go. We'll always experiment with different effects. Delays, obviously reverbs are always are good ones to create a bit of tension. But there's the great helix effect that does some wacky stuff on the modular effects. Try that on the try some of those out. There's some great pad effects. There is some great channel effects that you can work with as well. Let me just double check. The sound color effects. The sound color effects, okay? They are also a great option. They have that's what it has, that crush effect, that has that shimmer. It has a range of different tones that you can use to try out. And the great thing about those is because they apply to your channel, and then you can add one of the mode effects there as well, and then you can couple that with like a pad effect. So you have 3 effects there, right? All sort of smashing together. That's the only thing I would really say in these situations. Just be willing to just try things out. I wouldn't necessarily say like there's a sort of go-to, like there isn't like a go-to sort of master chain. If anyone tells you there's a sort of go-to master chain, just chuck that in the rubbish. You don't want to use that. Always, you can use elements of it, but every song has its own texture, its own sort of application, and that I will go from that perspective. And just always have a fresh canvas of what you want to do. I think if you're starting to sort of use replicates or something, just don't. I mean, and for me, that's a no. If that's something that you like to do, then okay, sure, give it a crack. That's not for me. Every song that I do, it's starting from a blank canvas. It's starting from fresh percussion, everything. So every song is its own story, its own personal thing, and it's music for me. Particularly when I'm creating music, it's very, very personal for me. It's a very emotional thing for me. It sometimes can be a very challenging journey when you're working on a project for me. Like I'm sure many of you are out there when you are working on your own music as well. So it's okay when you're getting ideas down, right? So perhaps in your digital station, or perhaps when you are working on certain things like this, when you are working on a mix, have your go-to things. There's nothing wrong with that. But just don't rely on them too heavily. Just don't be like, okay, that's what I'm going to use, right? Always be willing to just be a little bit uncomfortable. Don't get too comfortable in, that's your effect, right? Always be willing to push yourself and try something else out, try something new that, could work in that one. And again, that's when you are creating those unique moments. You're creating that experience rather than just playing the mix. Hey, it didn't disconnect. Okay, another thing you can do here is you can gradually increase also the intensity of things. You don't have to just have it like this here when it's sort of sustained and you're waiting it to sort of develop. you can increase the intensity and be more creative about what you're wanting to apply here. In this situation, I am a little bit more focused on bringing up that next one because I know that I want to switch into it. So I am a bit, my hands are tied in terms of what I can do 100% right now. You can hear like dun dun, right? So even trying to sort of, extend that out a little bit, having a delay when the most dun dun, when the kicks come in, working with that. The great thing with these ones is you're manipulating that stereo image, right? So when we have these effects in, right, especially in the section I'll show you, we go, I'm expanding out that stereo image. So not just from the center point where everything is, right, that focus point, we're moving things out into that stereo space and creating that depth. We're really creating height as well, because we're really extending out what we can present, with the effects. Okay, and you notice here, because I know that if I build up this effect, right, and I know if I let go, a lot of the energy is going to dissipate in it. Okay, so one of the ways you can mediate that is by not making it so noticeable. So you can see that we are letting go of the effect, right? But then we're adding in some of that, those sound color effects, right, to help smooth that out. So rather than just cutting out, and then you sort of, the energy is just, you're here and you're adding a bit of that color, and then you're sort of allowing it to just gently sort of blend into it. And for me, it's not at the same high intensity, but it's not as low as it could get, right? So we're just blending it through and we're allowing that intensity to keep going. Okay, so now we're adding something that's a little more permanent, so that I don't have to physically be there. Okay, so adding the color effect, we've allowed it to sort of, just, blend into the build, right? And we'll keep going. Now you can hear how the shimmer is really bouncing off and the percussive elements. Now we're creating that depth, right? We're creating that distance. So we're moving away. We're creating that separation. Okay, we've talked about this, right? So we're wanting to create, a bigger stereo space. We're creating a bigger sort of image of what's happening, and we're subconsciously allowing the song to sort of start moving away, right? And using a good amount of effects and different effects can really start creating that distance, right? So we're creating that sort of canyon effect, right? So instead of me being super close, we're moving back and we're creating that depth, right? When we're creating that separation, so we even though we are building, we're also moving away. Okay, we're drawing less and less attention to the song, and giving indication that we're about to switch over. This is the example I mentioned, I was just talking about, okay? So we're adding the effects in musically, right? So, and I know from, working on years on my own production and working with, effects and mixing my own work that I've created, the way that I am approaching it is from, the perspective of, if it was a song that I created, what else could I do in a live mix, right? So we are performing it, we're doing a live version of it. What can we do in the live version of it that makes it special, that makes it unique for what we're doing, okay? And this is one example of what we can do, okay? Okay, so as we're adding the effect, we allow it then to escape into the stereo space, and coming back in, escaping into the stereo space. we're adding the effect in, we release at the tail, then we're adding in the pad effects, okay, to double down on that tail, okay, then we're switching between them, right, we're creating that tension release, tension release, tension release, tension release, tension release, and we're allowing things just to build, multiply, okay, and now we're switching. Okay, so instead of going 1, 2, 1, 2, we're 1, 1, 1, 1, and we're just banging on that 4 to the floor, really amping it up. And we're allowing that tail to come in, so we play, release, okay, and we're creating that space, that image that we want, okay? And in your headphones, you can really feel, you can really hear it, and when we release, with a fader sort of slide like this, that sort of quick cut trans effect, right? Again, what you're doing is you're cutting up the mix, creating that separation, pushing it out, showing people that, giving an indication that something, something big is about to happen. And then, just when people are expecting that big sort of, moment, you cut things off. And you allow the effect tails to dissipate, push out into the stereo space, create that depth, that width, okay? Push it up, and if you can, create that height, you're pushing it up in, Now, we're musically waiting for it to dissipate, okay? Waiting for the tail to finish off, and then we bring in the next song.
What's wrong with these people? I'm telling you shit, he wants fucking bass head. I told you that. Everybody knows the Lord's have.
From my perspective, it's super confusing. Okay, well, what the hell is going on right now? So we've created this massive call that built up this tension. Okay, what is about to happen?
That sound now, sir. It's a sound that no.
And this is a moment where you can really just throw something left field and really invigorate your audience and really get them going.
Nobody else has. That's the thing. If he asks fucking 20 other guys to send them music, they're all gonna sound kind of the same.
Okay, so you're adding this deep sort of heavy trap sounding, hip hop vibe to things with some of those dubstep elements in there, and then you're also manipulating it with adding your live edit as well in there. So you can see how we, as we talked about this in the previous one, you're creating those live edits. That's what we're doing here. So we are manipulating the focus, the tension in the song. So instead of it going to the first drop, which I know isn't as heavy, we
fucking 20 other guys to send them music, they're all gonna sound kind of the same.
And then we cut to the next one, right? And to help with any sort of clip sound that you might have between the two or anything like that, that might happen in such a strong cut, with any of the information that's there, especially in the low end, we add a bit of a quick effect.
To send them music, they're all gonna sound kind of the same.
You're adding in an effect, and you're sort of, adding that bit of a crush onto that vocal, bring it back in, switch over. In this case, what I had mentioned, I didn't do, okay? So I did it beforehand, and in those situations, it's because what I didn't realize here is that it's finishing the vocal point, so there must be there might be just less information, not a lot of information. Then you're switching over to a point that only has like the vocal or like a cappella or something. So you don't have to deal with too much information in those situations, and you can then smoothly blend them in, okay? But if it was heavier, with a lot of low end and everything, and you're cutting it, you just want to be mindful of that cut and perhaps add in like a crush to mediate that cut. Okay, so let's look at one more time.
The music, they're all gonna sound 20 other guys to send them music, they're all gonna sound kind of the same.
Again, we're playing with the music, right? So I'm consciously thinking, okay, this song's a little more crunchy. I know the drop. The crush effect, that color, that sound color with this type of song is going to work well. So this is when, if you're asking, what effect should I use when, again, it's catered to the type of song, the texture of the piece of music you're working with. So I know that in this situation, it's a little bit darker, and it does have elements of that big crush. And using that crush effect helps. It complements the track very well, and you can apply it to that vocal and then cut into the drop. You'll also notice we are deliberately activating that effect on a particular line in the vocal. Okay, and yes, I'm serious. Okay, this is when we are, again, you're looking at music from a multi-dimensional standpoint. Okay, you're not looking at music from a face value. You're looking at more from the creative perspective. Then you're looking at not only just here's a song, but the musical content of it, the lyrics, what is being said in this music. Okay, and how can I work with that? You have X amount of songs. Why pick this one? Okay, and look, caveat, not every song's like that. Some songs just are cool, and I don't pay attention to the lyrical stuff. The melodic content is really key for me there. But some songs, the lyrical content is important for me, and in those cases, I will highlight that to an effect or something like that.
Any other guys that send them music, they're all gonna sound kind of the same.
3 other guys with similar kind of music, all gonna sound kind of the same, and I purposely, affect that vocal there just to give it a little more of sort of, a bit of sort of calling, and then we go.
Yeah.
And for me, subconsciously, that adds a little more aggressiveness to the whole thing. So you already have a bit of a sort of call out that, similar guys playing the same kind of thing, all gonna sound the same. And that to me is like, and you're calling it out lyrically, you're adding a bit of an effect there. Subconsciously, it's already adding a bit of a sort of angst. And then you go into this really sort of deeper sort of chorus drop section, and it adds a bit more weight onto what's happening. And to me, you're subconsciously listening to the vocal content a little bit more because you've highlighted a key moment in the vocal line.
We bring that G shit.
The percussive element, melodic content is, distorted, but the melody isn't, right? So we've done a flip around. So we quickly crushed it, and now we've flipped it. Now the percussive elements, the bass elements are distorted, and the vocal line's clean. Playing with that, so we're doubling onto that, adding that secondary beat with it. Particularly in the cyberpunk utopia universe, that live mix series, it's a little more malleable. It's a little more forgiving to the way I'll approach mixing. And this is when we can, really, play around with the turntable, play around with the pad effects, the vinyl break, reverse it, add a slip function, go wild with it. It's more forgiving. So you can see this is, for me, a very practical example of how we can create this, great build-up and this tension, and then we can really flip it, right? So, this type of, sort of, big build, like we mentioned at the beginning, it's been done before, right? It's been done many times in progressive house, these super massive, half a minute or so build-ups, and then go into another song, right? And you can use it to your advantage, and then completely just, switch it over. So you give something to people that's familiar with, and then people are like, come on, and then it's, from my perspective, it's almost more satisfying, right? So people sort of like, okay, they're very familiar with it, right? And then you just completely switch it over, right? So you've given something to people they're very familiar with, and then you switch it over to something else that completely like your opposite, and it's exciting, right? But knowing your moments, knowing when to do that is key. If I did it already like super quick beforehand, and I did something like this again, it's not as impactful, right? Yeah, so again, that tension release, okay? And tonally, it's a good example of this. Jet's a great example. Tonally, having those really intense moments and then break, and then it really showcases the musicianship there when you have those super intense moments and then the break. Tool is a great example of this. Having those very melodic, ballads, but then also having the really intense moments. And even though some of the moments might be a bit too long for my taste, when the more sort of upbeat, alternative distortion elements come in, they're so satisfying because you have this glorious, drum and musicianship, orchestral, 5-6 minute, ballad. And then when it goes into the distortion and the ramping up, it's so much more satisfying. And there's some great bands that do this very, very well. So Metallica is a great example of this. Having those glorious melodic sort of intros, those kind of moments, right? And then they go straight into like the thrash metal, or like the really heavy moments. But they strange my voice there. But that contrast is key, right? And those moments, those heavy moments, are so much more satisfying when you have that contrast. If it's just heavy nonstop, it's not as heavy after the third song, right? But if you add in like a ballad, and then you go, and then you're halfway through, you go into like super intense and thrash metal section. It's so much more rewarding and satisfying. So this tension release is key, and that's something that's universal for us. We understand this, this balancing act, right? The sun, the rainbow coming out after a storm or something like that, after the rain. That kind of feeling, having that contrast is important in life, and it gives you excitement in life. If everything is just the same and it's bland and it gets boring, you need that contrast, and that's something that I would love to see more of in mixes, and it's something unfortunately I don't see enough of. And if you are one of those people who are looking to incorporate more alternative genres and stuff like that, please do take this as an inspiration and then try to have a starting point. And I think that one of this is a great starting point for something like that. Cool. So I think this is a great starting point for something like this. You have this more progressive style build, and you are working with a build up, right? And then you can switch it into another completely different style of music, and it creates something fresh for that moment. Yeah. So then how would you approach it in your music? You're picking the right music. Again, there's trial and error, practice, picking different songs and seeing how you can blend them together, right? How that might work. And then sometimes just being courageous and just going left field with something. That's also a great idea. Nothing wrong with that. But just be careful, that having pockets and making sure that you maintain energy, right? When you are switching, one caveat I would say is that you want to find a song that has a similar type of energy, right? For something like this, when you are switching completely to a different style, right? You want to make sure it holds its own weight. And for something like that, you need something that it's big, it's heavy, it's in your face, for it to have its own presence and its own space. Particularly if you are building and building and building like this, the more you build, the more intense that answer needs to be. The more you give a call, you risk losing the mix if it doesn't live up to the build that you're creating. So yeah, that's just a caveat. I would look at heavier style songs, particularly if you are creating in a big build. Yeah. So that thing, yeah. So a little bit shorter one here, but I just wanted to demonstrate a more practical example of what we looked, an even very practical example of what we talked about in the breakdown, the last one, of creating that creating a big sort of tension moment, and then effectively creating a live edit and really working with the energy, the speed of the mix that's happening, and capitalizing on that energy. So you notice we don't lose that energy, right? We keep going and we maintain the same high energy. We're just switching the characteristics of it, and creating that live edit, and we keep up that urgency in the mix. Because when the typical structure of music is that it will start off with low information at the beginning, and then as you progress, more and more information will be there. So for something like this, we're starting at the beginning of a song, much less information, creating that live edit, we're moving into a section that has a lot more energy, a lot more things are happening, and we can maintain that energy, okay? And the key here is maintaining the energy. Not so much maintaining the same groove, but maintaining that same high, that same vibe. We're just changing the tone and then the character of the mix. Yeah. Awesome. So definitely check out the full mix for looking at the previous songs, looking at what we're going into now and how that character, how that now we're moving into more that some of the dubstep, some of the trap sounds, some of that heavier music, right? And we've just gone through the progressive house, more melodic stuff, creating that tension, and now we're answering it by really doubling down, living the alternative side of the dance music, looking at more the underground sort of post dubstep sounds, and just having a bit of fun because it's a lot more forgiving and really just experimenting, being creative with effects and the turntable and the vinyl spin and the breaking and the detuning and all that stuff, which is always great fun. Yeah, so just always be a little bit uncomfortable in your mix. I think that'll be the main takeaway from here. Never be too satisfied and always be willing to just go a little bit out of your comfort zone and add in a different effect. Just if it works. But don't hesitate and because you think it might not work. Just give it a shot. You never know, you might be overwhelmingly surprised how it complements. And the more you do it, you'll know what to add. And then you can have a quick starting point, but then always push you a little bit more. There's a great scene in the Top Gun Maverick movie, that beginning sequence, right? And he gets that Mark 10. He gets just always willing to go that extra edge, that just a little bit more, a little bit, make it a little bit uncomfortable. Okay, cool, we got there. Let's see how far we can. And sometimes it's disastrous. In that situation, the aircraft blew up and they fell and all that. But you never know. They could have got to that point and everything would have been alright. Going a little bit past that, living on that danger zone. Okay, I'll catch you in the next one. Okay, bye bye.